Laura.
Hi, Wei.
Hi.
Come on in.
Oh, good to see you finally. Thank you so much. You have a system now already established, yeah?
So this house is all electric. We shut off the gas. And so every appliance here in this house is run by electricity.
Okay.
And
And works here?
that's an infection stove.
Right.
So
Laura Jo Fu moved to Claremont 3 years ago. She was drawn by the community's dedication to sustainable living. Today, by connecting her heating, ventilation and AC through an HVAC system, she's reduced her energy footprint.
So this is our HVAC system, basically,
I see.
and replaces a gas, HVAC system.
Okay. So that's your baby in a way.
Yeah.
Everything comes from there.
Everything comes from there. Very fuel efficient, very efficient.
Megan, Evan, Jay, good to see all of you. So thank you so much for welcoming me into your lovely town. I know you all have stories to tell in terms of where sustainable development is in your personal life. Megan, you've been working with the poorest community of this place. Tell us how solar panel is working so far.
So I work in Pomona, California, which is one of the most environmentally impacted communities in Southern California. It's also a community that is surrounded by wealthier communities and often gets just like all the things that they don't want kind of dumped into it. So I work with an organization called CHIRP, which stands for the Community Home Energy Revolution Project. The vision of our founder was to work with communities to bring solar to the folks who typically can't access it, and that is our low-income communities, because solar, at least in the United States, is very expensive. And because of policies that have shifted in kind of our state government over the past couple of years, it used to be like somewhat affordable, and now that NEM 3.0 has taken place, and people can no longer get kind of money from selling energy back to the grid, it put our lower income communities in an even worse position. Energy and homes are like one of the greatest pollutants, like even more than cars, if you can imagine looking at California.
So how does that work?
We developed a concept where we would actually manufacture panels in a small facility in the heart of the city of Pomona to provide job training to its residents, and then also sell panels, obviously, that we're making, and take that funding and use it to install community solar projects or solar on a low-income home to remove that barrier. We had a strong start. So the assembly member actually from one of the communities, Claremont, saw an opportunity to be a partner with a city that faces more hardship than Claremont does. And he got us $2.1 million from actually the state budget. So we were able to develop the factory, develop kind of training modules, and do work with a lot of our students to kind of do research, because we were using a new kind of innovative type of solar. Recently, though, with the changes in the federal government and what has happened with the Department of Energy, and with the EPA and other things, it's been very difficult for our organization to survive.
I see. Let's go to your story, Evan.
Thank you very much. I'm a historian, and I worked for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for 25 years. I went there with bright hopes and knowledge, not much technical knowledge, but philosophical knowledge. I wanted to see something better. I am convinced to this very day that the creation of the U.S. EPA was the best political decision of this country in the 20th century. But regrettably, after a few years, I began to realize that political interests of the powerful, that means the people with petroleum, the people who have the industry, they would have access to the EPA through congressmen and senators, and their petition to do X, Y, Z in water or solar or any other decision went through that filter, and therefore the EPA administrator sometimes, despite the contrary opinion or the advice of the scientists, we had 800 scientists in one program that I worked, he would do something different because that satisfied the political demands of the moment. And in 2014, I wrote a book about that called Poison Spring, in which I looked at the whole history of the EPA, the politics of pollution, and I was hoping that this country would make that book a bestseller. They would read it and try to do something different, because the political influence over the EPA is destroying the agency. So the people at the EPA, despite the fact that they are good scientists, they mean well, they have political bosses that are illiterate and they don't want to do good because their philosophical vision is very limited and they don't have the public good as the center of what they are doing.
I see. What about your story, Jay?
I had a very broad background and have had the opportunity to work for an oil company to see that side of the picture. And also to work with NASA and teaching for many, many years a diverse array of courses, over 45 different courses, teaching with religion scholars, historians, and so forth. What this has provided is a unique big picture, sort of like having individual tesserae to give you a clearer view of what's going on in the world. A lot of these courses were travel courses to the Galapagos, to the Ecuadorian Amazon and so forth, to Borneo, etc. You can see what's happening to the world. Especially a person of my age gets to see longevity, how things have changed, and can extrapolate from there to the future to see what it will be like in the future. I saw the decimation of natural areas, the development of urban areas that have mushroomed out. When I was, one of my majors was microbiology, and so you can inoculate a Petri plate and look at it 3 days later and you have just little bitty dots. Look at it 6 hours later and you got bigger dots. Look at it 6 hours later and it's covering almost the whole thing. If you look at satellite imagery of the globe, the NASA generated images, it mirrors that beautifully. And the Earth is a finite entity, and therefore it's like a Petri plate, and we are continuing to grow, eating up our forests, eating up grasslands. 97% of the tall grass prairie is gone. Only 3% left.
I heard your story. Can you help us to understand, as a result of the expertise that you have, why sustainable development, as grand as they are, raised by the United Nations, inspired by everyone, almost everyone in the world signed on it, so much underperformed, especially in the field of sustainable development, in the field of climate change and environment-related fields?
I dare suggest that it's the inequality of power that makes the United Nations so impotent to expand from the books and the plans that they have about sustainable development into actually guiding, let's say, Bolivia, Greece, France, for that matter, to actually produce food that is clean, water that is drinkable, and to reduce the energy that increases the temperature of the planet by burning petroleum. So it's the money and the power that is actually in balance in all these wonderful ideas about sustainable development, or just as beautiful the ideas that I discovered in China when I got there in 2015 about ecological civilization. That's perfection. If humans can actually do it, but you need to have a discussion between the leaders and the people have to be more involved, and therefore to be more involved, they need to be more knowledgeable about what is ecological, what is good, what is bad.
All right, do you think it is a bottom-up approach?
I would say it is a bottom-up approach. So many of the community members that I work with, both through CHIRP and through God's Pantry, which is a food pantry, that I'm part of, like many of the individuals that we work with are struggling every day just to put food on their table, to pay their bills, and they don't have time sometimes to even think about what the opportunities are because it's literally just about survival. Because their income is like so restricted, you're going to buy the cheapest product because you have to. Even if you know like it's bad for the environment or it's full of plastic, they're like, we just don't have any other options. And so it's, and that's really, really sad to see.
You just suggested it should work, but it seems that you're saying there are so many obstacles, and therefore it's almost impossible to work.
Nothing is fully impossible. I think it's a really hard road, and it involves changes on a variety of levels, especially economic levels, because our society is just not set up for communities to work together. I know there are things I don't have like the specific examples in mind of things in Ireland that they've done to create more community. I know there's things in Europe that they've done, but the United States, we're very separated in a lot of ways. And obviously the young folks are good at mobilizing, and I think things will come out of that, but I don't know exactly. It's going to be a hard road, and we're going to have to learn to come back together as communities.
I think it has to be a grassroots action, more specifically an individual action. We have control over what we do. We can make a choice of whether we want to go solar or whether we want to continue using fossil fuels.
She just argued some of the folks don't have the choice.
That's correct. That's correct. But there are choices that we make, thousands of choices that we make that we do have control over. Just, we're a commodity-based world. It's stuff that we buy. There is so much stuff that people buy, even people with very low income, that we simply do not need. There are so many things that we could share if we had a community-based system. Think about all the tools that we have in the United States. Everybody has their own tool set and so forth. They use them maybe 5 times a year. And having a community resource to do that is important. Growing our own food, having a garden and so forth is exceedingly important.
So you're saying whatever the UN is saying, whatever the national government policies are, let's just do our own stuff.
I'm saying the United Nations has a very important role to play, and that is looking at this big picture. We can't go out and see what's going on around the world in the polar environment and so forth, but we can hear that information. The economic forces, fights against what we really should do on the grand scale. So what do? We work with what we can do. Morally, for an sake of ethical integrity, we need to do what we can and approach that as best as we can.
Evan?
I would add to what he said is that we have in this society and every place else on earth, we have people who claim to be Christians, Muslims, or whatever other religion. Those people have the ethical responsibility to support the local initiatives and therefore to support solar energy, to support organic farming rather than gigantic agribusiness, to support eating well, and to actually fund some of these efforts. And the United Nations is part of that picture. The United Nations also ought to be more practical. When they are in Africa or Asia or Latin America, they ought to get involved with and guide the small farmers to become even more. Because most of our efforts in the U.S. and every place else is with the big agricultural people, large farmers, not small farmers. And we need many more small-scale farmers.
China and United States, as all of you know, are the biggest economies in the world. They're also the biggest consumers of energy. Of course, China is the largest developing economy, has been making a lot of efforts in green, sustainable. U.S., we have also seen at very many different levels. So the question is very viable as to how these two players, they can work together rather than being antagonists toward one another on the road toward sustainable development goals. And of course, in complement to the United Nations role. I mean, this is a big topic. You hear analysts talk about it every day, but I just want to have your opinion, given your already personal experiences and input, about how this would work.
The way it should work is that we should have an administration that understands the global situation and to work collectively, these two great powers of the world, to bring about the changes that are needed to reduce our ecological impact. That's the way it should work. The way it could work is a very difficult question. We would have to have a massive change in our administration right now because we have totally reversed, and it's not just a matter of not promoting sustainable development, it's a matter of destroying the efforts that we have made in the past. And so we have to have a change in that. And I hope is an important thing to retain. I hope that we can reverse the trends that have occurred during the current administration.
Evan?
You know, I have been to China 3 times, and I was really very pleased and very impressed by what's going on. And each time I go, I ask, and they take me to a village, a Chinese village, and I have seen how peasants work in China, as well as in Greece, where I come from, and other countries. So if I were right now about China and the United States, I understand the political problems and the competition, but there are also alternatives to what's happening now with Mr. Trump and so on. We have hundreds of universities, thousands of scientists who understand the problem. Therefore, I would recommend that American and Chinese scientists get together, and I would recommend the academic community ought to be more active and more vociferous about something that determines life and death to us and to the planet and to us and to our children. And
Will
so
the academic community be able to do that given the current geopolitical environment?
I would think so, yeah, because I mean there are some very right-wing Republican professors and so on, but I would say for the most part, climatologists try not to get involved with political decisions and so on. And they publish their papers and they publish their books, and we know who they are primarily. So they need maybe a foundation, maybe money from China to get them together in a conference. I would do that. Get them to China to discuss, spend 4 or 5 days talking about this continuously, and why they need to act before it's, like the Guterres said, it's too late.
Megan?
So we have the academic piece. We obviously have, you said, the political barrier and the changes that would need to happen there to form like a relationship that allows us to move towards these goals. It also makes me think of the Institute of Ecological Civilization and the center they have in China. So right now there's a working relationship through a nonprofit in the U.S. and then an organization in China trying to bring these values and these conversations together, especially with university students and young people. I think that's one way, in addition to the very important things that you guys mentioned, to start to bridge that gap is even creating those relationships starting at a younger level so that as they're growing up and beginning to take positions of power, there's a new mentality that exists.
I want to thank the 3 of you. I didn't expect that I would have a conversation like this, but this has been a very enriching and very confirming conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.